In 2021, the Atlanta Hawks shocked the NBA by being a top 4 team in the Eastern Conference in the regular season and making it all the way to the Eastern Conference Final. But we know that last year they fell back to reality a little bit. Was only the 8 seed. Their defense definitely fell off a cliff. They struggled with injuries, and they were bounced in the first round easily by the Miami Heat. But I think that in the 2022 and 23 season, this team's going to bounce back, shock the NBA once again, and be competing in the Eastern Conference once again seriously. And in today's video, I'm going to discuss 5 reasons why I think this is the case, so let's get into it. The first reason I'm going to be discussing why I think the Hawks will be good again this season is because the offseason addition of Dejan and Murray, I think this is basically the perfect fit for this team. We know that about a month ago, Dejan and Murray was traded for Danilo Gallinari, who's a role player on the Hawks, and some draft picks, and honestly, from the Spurs perspective, I don't really understand this trade. I think Dejan was a great part of their actual young core for the future, but now he's on the Atlanta Hawks, and I think he fits well in this team on both ends of the floor. Let's talk about offensively first. This Hawks team has always had a very good offensive system over the last few years, and that's going to be my next reason I discuss as well. But the only problem is, I think at this point in time, their offensive system might be becoming a little bit predictable for opposing defenses. Just everything's kind of centered around Trae Young and the pick and roll and kicking the ball out to shooters on the perimeter. And I think Dejan being added to this offense adds a little bit more diversity to this offensive system and a very good second option for their offense. He can penetrate, he can score at the rim a little bit more, and allow Trae Young to play off the ball just a little bit more. Most of the time we know that Dejan is going to be the second option playing off ball, but I think this adds some diversity because he can definitely handle the ball and he can be the one kicking out to the perimeter and scoring around the rim a little bit more. He can be kind of more of a shooting guard, play in the post a little bit as a second option, and just overall be a really good facilitator and add a little bit more unpredictableness to this team because of how he can also be that guy that can average 9 assists per game, and that's exactly what he did last season. He's going to be a little bit more of that kind of interior score facilitator for this team, and I think they kind of needed that secondary playmaker to add to this offense to make it even more difficult on opposing defenses. Now, I think the biggest part where Dejan adds value for this team is on the defensive end of the floor. And again, I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in depth later on as well. But really the main problem with the Hawks last year defensively was how they didn't have enough perimeter defense, and they didn't have that one guard that can lock up and clamp up against the other team's best guard. They've always had a really good interior defending team over the last few years with Clint Capella and how their system worked around him, how he did a really good job protecting the rim, grabbing rebounds, defending the pick and roll really well, and how the Hawks perimeter defenders would allow the opposing offense to drive towards Capella, and they also had good one-on-one defenders at the 3 and 4 like John Collins, who's a good post defender, DeAndre Hunter, who's a decent perimeter defender and a really good post defender as well. But they didn't have that kind of perimeter defending, 3-point shooting defending team or that one guy either. And now Dejan can really come in and be that guy for them that can be their number 1 perimeter defender, lock up the other team's point guard night in and night out, and do a really good job of contesting 3-point shots. He's great on rotations, and he's just going to provide a lot there as well. Perimeter defense is one of those things where you can't just have one guy come in and change it all, but he is definitely going to make an impact on this team's perimeter defense, and now it's just going to be a little bit easier for them to defend, get out in transition at times as well, which is another point where Dejan can add something to their offense, and overall it's just going to make their defensive system easier because now they have a guy that can defend the perimeter at an elite level. So I think he perfectly fits into their defensive system and will add some good diversity on the offensive side of the floor as well. The second reason I want to discuss, like I mentioned earlier, is just really how elite this Hawks offensive system is. And because overall they were middle of the pack this year, I think this kind of got lost by NBA fans just how good their offense is. This team had the second best offensive rating in the entire regular season last year, with an offensive rating of 115.4, which is definitely elite. They also had the fourth best assist to turnover ratio as a team in the regular season, and the third best 3-point percentage as a team, which I'm going to discuss in depth a little bit later on as well. They really just surrounded Trae Young with the best possible pieces for an offensive system led by a guy like Trae Young. They have two kind of lob threats and pick and roll threats with Trae Young in John Collins and Clint Capella, guys that he can run the pick and roll with. And then other than that, they pretty much just mainly surrounded Trae with perimeter shooters, guys that can knock down threes off of the catch and space the floor. And then, like I said as well, Dejan and Murray is going to add to this offensive system. He can be kind of another facilitator. Sometimes you might see Trae Young as one of those off-ball guys. He can take a break from being the main guy sometimes and play off-ball. Maybe he can get some more catch-and-shoot threes with DeJounte on the floor. DeJounte can provide some good interior scoring for them, good facilitating, draw some double teams in the paint, and overall this offensive system I think is going to be probably even better next season. Like I said, it can be predictable just because they run a ton of pick and rolls and have a lot of possessions where Trae's just kicking it out to the perimeter for three, but if it's working and it's just so dominant and guys like Trae and Clint Capella are running pick and rolls where they're scoring every possession, sometimes there's not a ton you can do to defend it. So bottom line, this offensive system is still definitely dominant. We're still going to see Trae averaging near 30 and 10 next season. He's just that kind of player that is a fantastic facilitator, great at creating his own shot off of the dribble, great in the mid-range area, throws some very good lobs to his pick and roll partners like Collins and Capella, and overall they've just surrounded a Trae Young oriented offensive system very well, and now the addition of a second option like Dejan and Murray is going to make it that much more dynamic as well. The third reason I'm going to discuss is I think the Hawks defense is going to make a big comeback this year. In 2021 their defense was pretty much top 10 in the NBA and especially very good in the playoffs, but last season in terms of defensive rating they ranked 26th in the league, almost near the floor in the league in terms of defense. And like I said, the main problem was really just their perimeter defense, and they ranked 25th in the league in opponents' 3-point percentage. They just don't have a lot of guys that effectively contest threes and can defend the perimeter at an elite level overall. And like I said, Dejan Murray is going to be a very good addition to that. He's definitely going to help that out a lot. And some of their other main kind of wing defenders, post defenders, and sometimes perimeter defenders, guys that stand out are DeAndre Hunter and John Collins. Both of these guys struggled with injuries last season and only played 53 and 54 games respectively. So if they can keep these really key defenders healthy as well, this Hawks defense is going to be a completely different defensive team that you saw last year compared to potentially this upcoming season. And the main component of their defensive system, which I've talked about a lot on this channel, is Clint Capella and how a lot of the times the Hawks can force teams to drive towards Capella. He's just a very good overall interior defender, and when he's fully healthy and at his best, he's a top 10 defender in the league, and I think I'll probably always stand by that. The way that he can defend the pick and roll, the way that he can go straight up at the rim and be a great shot blocker and overall rim protector provides a lot of value for this team because it's really hard to score in the paint when Capella's there. He also had a stretch last season where he was out and the Hawks really struggled defensively without him. So I think if this team can stay fully healthy and DeJounte can fit into this defensive system the way that I'm expecting him to, I think you could see this team have an over-average defense next season as well, which would really push them over the top from a middle-of-the-pack team to a top-of-the-pack team in the Eastern Conference. The fourth reason that I want to discuss, which could separate the Hawks from other contending teams, is how their really kind of core group of players has now been together for quite a few years, and they've developed some really good chemistry together. And I think this is something that's kind of being lost a little bit in the NBA, because we live in an era in the NBA right now where there's so many trades and signings, and you rarely see players spend their whole team or their whole career with one team. Even superstar players are constantly bouncing team to team, and it's tough for really a core group of players on one team to really stick together for 3 or 4 years. But when they do, they develop some chemistry, and we've seen this with teams like the Boston Celtics and how they've seen success because of Tatum and Brown and Smart sticking together for so long. The Milwaukee Bucks being able to win a championship because of their really 2 main core players sticking together for so long. Especially the Golden State Warriors, their main core, as we know, have been together for so long, and they've seen so much immense success because of that. And now we're seeing with the Atlanta Hawks that Trae Young, John Collins, and Clint Capella, and even a lot of the kind of shooters around this team too that are surrounding them, a guy like Bogdanovic, for example, kind of these core guys, they've been together for a long time now. They know how the system of this team works on both ends of the floor, and they've just developed some really good chemistry together on both ends of the floor, and I think we're really going to see that kind of stand out this season. And we see that a guy like DeJounte is coming in as well, but I think he's the type of player that has a very high IQ and can fit into a new team very quickly. So in general, I just think this team's going to have really good chemistry, and I think that could separate them from some of the rest of the competition. Last reason I wanted to discuss why this team's going to be really good next year, their 3-point shooting. And again, I touched on this earlier a little bit. They just have really good catch and shoot options surrounding Trae Young. He's also a great shooter himself. And overall, the 3-point shooting on this team, which we know is important in today's NBA, is really at an elite level. And last season, they ranked 3rd in the entire league in team 3-point percentage at 37.4%. 3-point shooting in general was down a little bit last year, but the Hawks were still able as a team to shoot a well above average 3-point percentage. They lost some of their shooters like Danilo Gallinari in the DeJounte trade, along with Kevin Huerter. He's on the Sacramento Kings now, but they still do have a lot of great surrounding players around Trae Young that can catch and shoot the 3 very effectively. Some of them can do it off the dribble as well, and the 3-point shooting on this team is still going to be very good at an elite level, I think, next season. You've got guys like Bogdanovic, Lou Williams, Cam Reddish, who can hopefully have a fully healthy season. We know he can, of course, be a very good and effective 3-point shooter. DeLon Wright, and many more players on this team that shoot the 3 at a very high level. Not to mention, too, that I think AJ Griffin was the steal of this year's draft. He might not be impacting this team very well immediately next season, and I know this is kind of off topic, but I think in the future for this Hawks team, he's going to be a very good addition as well. He can also shoot the 3 pretty effectively, play in the post, and I think he's going to be a very good player for this team once he develops. And another young developing player on this team that actually I think could make a really good impact this year and potentially break out is Onyeka Okongwu. And this doesn't have anything to do with the 3-point shooting, but he could also develop into a very good effective defensive anchor, almost be the Clint Capella 2.0 coming off of the bench, provide some very good defense and rim protection, be a lob threat off of the bench offensively as well, and kind of fit into that role off of the bench. So overall, those are 2 guys that I think in the future could really develop well for this team and really add to their depth, and they have great 3-point shooting offensively, which is very important in today's NBA. Overall, those are the 5 reasons why I think the Hawks are going to absolutely shock the NBA this year, be a top 4, top 3 team in the East, and really compete with some of the really good teams at the top of this conference, like the Celtics, Bucks, Bulls, Sixers, Raptors. I think the Hawks will be right up in there, and they could definitely compete in the playoffs as well, just like they did in 2021. Offensively and defensively, I think this team is pretty well set. Defensively, obviously, they struggled a lot last year, but like I said, I think there's going to be massive improvements on that end of the floor. The addition of Dejan and Murray is perfect for this team. I think he could prove this year that he's a top 35 to 30 player in the NBA for sure. And overall, I think this Hawks team is very promising, and I think they're going to do very well in this upcoming 2022 and 23 season. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. That's all of the analysis I've got today. Make sure you comment down below your thoughts on the Hawks as well, and I'll see you guys next video.